You're listening to Politics Within Reason.
Welcome to another episode of Politics Within Reason. I'm your host, Michael Ham.
I'm Holly Griffith.
And I'm Samuel Jennings.
Today we have quite the show. We guarantee that you will hear something that will upset you and probably, hopefully, something that you also agree with.
That's politics.
That is politics. That's right. Do you guys want to go into an outline of the show? What are we thinking we're going to cover tonight?
Okay, well, I'd like to talk about the 20-week abortion ban that the House of Representatives voted on today.
Oh.
Yeah, let's definitely talk about that one. And then we'll go to something that's even easier, gun control, right?
Oh, yeah, that's simple. Give us 5 minutes and we'll knock that out, right?
Yeah, we can solve that one and no problem. But okay, yeah, let's start with this bill. Holly, can you give us a bit of an overview of it?
Yes, I can. So the bill is called, and they always have the greatest names for these bills, don't they?
Rebellious, don't they?
The Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. And so it's premised that on the assertion that a fetus can experience pain starting at 20 weeks post-fertilization. However, that claim is not supported by any kind of scientific evidence. There was a study done in 2005, and the comprehensive literature shows, and this is by researchers done from the University of California, San Francisco. They concluded that fetal perception of pain is unlikely before the third trimester. And actually, in testimony to the House Committee on the Judiciary, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists stated that the organization knows of no legitimate scientific data or information that supports the statement that a fetus experiences pain at 20 weeks gestation. So they're voting on this bill based on the premise that we can't have abortions past 20 weeks because the fetus feels pain, yet no scientific data actually supports that claim. And it's so frustrating because it's like when Hobby Lobby went up in front of the Supreme Court and they argued that, well, we don't want to give insurance to people to fund these certain kinds of contraceptives like IUDs because they may be abortifacients, which they're not. And it's just so frustrating whenever Congress or the Supreme Court or whoever votes on certain things, and it's just not supported by any kind of science. And it's like, what are we doing? No, you can't make a claim and then vote on it, and it's not supported by anything.
Well, it turns out you can make a claim and then vote on it. And unfortunately, it works, right? Can we maybe get into what is the current Supreme Court established time beyond which abortions, except for extreme medical emergencies, are currently illegal, right? So currently there are restrictions on when you can have an abortion. What is that current time frame?
So Roe versus Wade gave women the right to an abortion until the age of viability. And that was when the fetus can survive outside the womb. Most doctors put the age of viability at about 24 weeks. And I think there's currently 2 or 4 states that will actually do an abortion that late.
Yeah, there aren't very many doctors either.
No, there's not. No, I think there's only 4. And I would highly recommend everyone watch the documentary After Tiller. So Dr. Tiller is the doctor who was shot years ago outside of his church, actually, because he was one of the doctors that would perform one of these late abortions. And so this documentary there's only like 4 of these doctors left in the country who does these abortions that late. And only about 1% of abortions actually occur after 21 weeks. So it's not like these women are just sitting around like, well, I guess it's been 20 weeks. I'll just go have an abortion today. No, that's not what's happening at all.
And the vast majority, and the vast majority of the ones that happen after 21 weeks happen before 24 weeks, right? So they're not just waiting until the baby's about ready to be delivered and then deciding they want an abortion.
No, it's not. It's many different reasons. They're saving up money. It's because they've already put so many barriers in place to having abortions that the clinic down the road that used to be there isn't there anymore because of trap laws. They have to go to 2 different appointments. So they have to take off of work. Now you have to have counseling, or you have to have an ultrasound, or you have to have things that you didn't have to have before. So it's making people have abortions later and later because there's so many hurdles to jump through. But one of the main reasons is that there's tests that can be done now that can detect fetal abnormalities that can only be done later as the woman is further along.
Right. You can't see them before about 18 to 20 weeks. Yeah. There's just not.
Exactly.
Anyone who's had a pregnancy knows that 18 to 20 week appointment is just one of the scariest ones you go to, because that's where, if you've had friends who have ever had to find out that their child is just not fully developed and is not alive in the womb. That's such a horrific thing. And I cannot believe that this bill doesn't take any of that into account. It doesn't take in, if you're going to make this ban, why are you going to make a woman carry to term a dead baby? Like, that's just such a sick thing.
It is. And that provision is not in the bill to excuse those cases. It's not in the bill.
I mean, and that's ultimately what's going to kill these bills, is that they just cannot take this reality that sometimes biology has terrible mix-ups that happen that are genetic or developmental or whatever it was.
I mean, these are babies that are wanted.
Yeah.
These are babies that are wanted. It's they don't, these women don't want to abort these fetuses. They want to carry them to term.
Yeah. Late term. And it's usually not just a elective type thing. It is because something horrific has happened.
If the baby is going to die, the woman's going to die, or if the baby is so horrifically deformed that it wouldn't be able to live a meaningful life. I mean, that's really what we're talking about in a majority of cases here.
Yeah.
And in many cases, they'll live for like 5 minutes and then die.
Terrible pain.
And so the woman has to give birth, which is in itself, it could be a dangerous or complicated procedure, and then hold the baby and it dies in her arms. And it's like, why put someone through that? It's just, God, I can't.
And the thing is, you're not forced to have this abortion. If you would like to do that, you're welcome to, right? That is
exactly.
legal.
Exactly.
And
it should be a choice.
It should be a choice. And the thing that really gets me about this is that it's a dignity thing, especially when there really are these just terrible defects. You can choose to do this on your own term, with. Right.
Exactly.
And this really, we'll get into this later, but, this is one of these things where if you have these rights, it seems that if you're going to go saying people's rights should not be infringed in one area, and then you go in here and you really start infringing these rights here, it's a very strange argument to have.
It's absolutely strange. But if you're going to infringe on them, at least infringe on them based upon good, science and have a good reason to back up your argument. But this is just based on nothing.
Yeah, if they were talking about it at 28 weeks, then maybe there would be a discussion to have based on the science. Right. But the other thing I want to bring up too is that we don't have any precise way of dating the age of a fetus or of a developing child, if you prefer that terminology, because it's all dated from the last date of the missed period, right? And there's no way to say, okay, ding, here's where the kid's at exactly 20 weeks. It's a fuzzy area. So how are we going to legislate a hard cutoff on a fuzzy area?
Right. I mean, it's definitely a gray area. It's not, there's a lot of hard science there, but at some point it does become a gray area. But regardless, if there is a gray area, just to say that 20 weeks, boom, we're going to make laws based on that because we just decided that the fetus can feel pain. No, that's just wrong.
Yeah.
That's wrong.
I do want to be clear that I'm not advocating for a ban on abortions past 28 weeks. I'm just stating that if they truly cared about preventing abortions for fetuses that could feel pain, that would be the cutoff, because that's what the science says. I mean, before then, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the nerves are starting to develop, but the central nervous system is not developed enough so that it can have meaningful input and processing from the peripheral.
There might be around 24 weeks or something.
Yeah, I think it's 24 is when it's viable, and that's what the Supreme Court versus Wade. That's what the Supreme Court.
You're right. Okay, sorry, I got my timeline.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
I swear I'm not an OBGYN, so
No, it's okay.
And I think the point to make is that I think everyone agrees there should be limits on abortion, right? Except maybe the most insane fanatics. Yeah. And this 24 weeks makes a lot of sense. The viability makes a good deal of sense. Up until that point, there's some autonomy issues that you really have to balance out. And
even past that point, do you really want the government nosing into, is it okay to give an abortion to somebody who's got a child with this birth defect? I mean, how long does the child have to have as a prospective life in order to be protected? I mean, are we talking an hour or a week, a month? You know, what if we're talking about somebody who never develops beyond, you know, who doesn't have a brain but could theoretically live on a ventilator? These are issues that a government bureaucracy is not equipped to deal with. And what we really need is a conversation between a woman and her doctor and whoever else she wants in that conversation.
Right. And look, medical ethics, this is an ever evolving field. You know, I'm not saying the conversation stops here. It absolutely doesn't.
No.
You know, for a majority of men to just say, this makes me feel good to put this ban on these women. This is not sound science. This is not how our democracy should work. This is not where we should be right now. And it's very curious to me because in 2013, the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals struck down an Arizona law that would have banned abortions at 20 weeks. And there was another law in Idaho that was also found unconstitutional in 2013. So I'm just wondering, why is Congress, well, I guess I shouldn't wonder why. I know why. But what's the point of pursuing this when these 20-week bans have already been found unconstitutional in federal court?
So here's my raise money, they get you elected.
I guess.
So here's my thought on that. I mean, if we go at this purely from the politics angle, you know, we can assume that the Republican Party is doing this as a political ploy. Okay, so they've got two eventualities going on here. The bill's going to the Senate. We know Trump will sign it, but we know it's got a chance of dying in the Senate. So we know that there's a lot of Democrats coming up in 2018 in the Senate that are running for re-election in states that are very pro-choice. I think, you know, places like one of the Dakotas or Joe Manchin in West Virginia. And so they're going to see if they can use this issue to force some of those Democrats to take what is in their state an unpopular stand and hopefully pick up those seats. At least that's what I think what their calculus is. And if it passes, then guess what? They get a test case for the new Supreme Court. And, you know, we know Republicans love litigating their laws, and they love pushing the limits and to see where they can get it.
Yeah, they like fighting culture wars in court. You know, as much as they accuse the left of doing it, it's really one of these things that I guess everyone likes it, right? Everyone loves fighting their culture wars in court.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's a win-win-win for them. So they've already won by getting it out of the House of Representatives. You know, if the Senate shoots it down, they can use it for fundraising. They can use it to target vulnerable Democrats in 2018. And God knows there's a lot of them. Because we picked up a whole bunch of seats in red states in 2010 that we're going to have to 2012 that we need to defend. And if it somehow passes, you know, they'll have a justification to their base that a lot of the people in their base will be very happy with them, and they'll show up and vote in 2018 and 2020, even if they do nothing else. They passed a bill that said abortion ban on it. You know?
You're right. And to prove that point as to how hot or how popular abortion is. As of September 1st this year, so as of September 1st, 2017, in the U.S., there have been 1,396 anti-abortion provisions introduced in the United States.
Is that that's across state legislatures?
That's states. Yeah, that's including states. But 1,396. That's just as of September 1st. So it's a hot topic.
Yeah, it's a reliable get out the vote issue. I mean, like, not to be too cynical, I think a lot of them do actually believe in their cause as well. But you can see a winning streak that correlates to the pushing of these laws, right? They used to be that Republicans were at least sort of respectful of the idea that this was a right that women had. And since about 2010 or so, they found a really winning issue with this.
Yeah, if we want to push it back and look back at history, we can look back at Nixon and the Southern strategy, bringing the Dixiecrats into the Republican Party as the integration of conservative social values into what was very much a broad spectrum political party at that time. And then Reagan really drove it home, integrating in the religious right. And that's been their platform. It's basically been conservative social values and a reaction to progress in terms of civil rights and social values. that's been driving conservative politics.
So what's odd is that the opinion of abortion, like whether it should be legal or not, has stayed pretty constant, right, since Roe, as I understand it from polling. And so it's interesting that it swung so far in this one direction. And
yes, especially since about 1 out of 3 women, last time I checked, will have an abortion sometime in their lifetime.
Yeah, that's what I've seen too. And of course, who's the congressman? What, Murphy, I think.
Oh my God! Who voted for this bill? By the way,
voted for it. But you know, his mistress.
I kind of didn't really seem to feel that was a strong value of his. Really,
my abortion is the right abortion.
My abortion is the moral abortion, right?
Exactly.
Because it's my mistress having it. We can't let children be born out of wedlock.
Right. You can't hurt my career. Oh God.
Isn't that, I mean, and that's not the first Republican who's been found to do this. And why doesn't this hurt the party?
Right? We know of.
So just to catch everybody up who maybe hasn't seen the article in the past week. So it's Representative Tim Murphy, Pennsylvania, and he's actually announced that he will retire at the end of his term. But
today he announced that
he basically sent a text message to his mistress asking her to get an abortion after she told him that she was pregnant, and then he also told her that his staffers are the ones who write up all of the pro-life stuff, and that he really doesn't believe it that much, and he's going to try to de-emphasize it in the future.
What a great congressman! What other issues do his staff legislate?
Yeah. But here's the problem, right? Like, so we all get that politics means you go out and you go out and you present certain values that you hope you would believe in. But why does this blatant hypocrisy not count against him? I mean, he is going to force himself to retire, but he's not being forced out tomorrow, right? It's not like Ryan is saying, get out of here. He's going to get to retire. He's not being
forced out. He just doesn't want to run for re-election. He doesn't want to deal with it, but he's still going to get that really nice congressional pension and all the lifetime benefits.
Yeah. Why isn't he forced out though? Right. Why is admitting this core plank wasn't a big deal to him? And in fact, he was very much opposed to this core plank. He was willing to bend it and break it no matter what. It doesn't mean anything, right? Nothing means anything.
I want to quote one of the other podcasts out there that I really enjoy listening to, which is Pod Save America. And when they were trying to come up with a Republican that the Republican Party would not support, all that they could arrive upon is a cannibal who's for single payer. Otherwise, as long as he's a Republican, the party infrastructure is behind him.
So this brings up a question. Should the liberals become that way, right? We've had so many purity battles that just go forever, it seems like. And some of them, of course, are Russian and conservative fueled because they know it gets to us. But are we going to have to adopt Reagan's, 11th commandment for progressives, which is, okay, if you get a progressive up there, you just support him and that's it.
Well,
or should we?
Here's my thinking on that. I mean, it's okay to fight within the party, within the primary process. And what you do is you have a contentious primary, you hammer out all your ideological differences, you go to the convention, you nominate people, you build a platform, and then you vote for whoever has that, that correct character next to their name. Unless you're in an area where, that kind of reasoning doesn't apply, like, you want to, if you're in, Alabama and you want to cast a protest vote for a third party candidate, whatever, that's fine. Go ahead. Democrat isn't going to win anyways. It's always going to be some crazy yahoo like Roy Moore.
We're still pulling for Doug Jones. We're still pulling.
Yes, absolutely. And I do want to give a shout out to Doug Jones, who is within spitting distance of Roy Moore, by the way. Last time I checked, he was 4 to 6 points down,
but it's not an endorsement. No endorsements. We do not give those. No, we do think that you should go look at Doug Jones' candidacy. That's right.
It's just a factual statement.
That's right.
Absolutely. But, the point is that you fight with each other within the party to determine the future of the party. And, you hash out these differences. That's why we've got such a long primary process. It's imperfect, but it is a way for us to get together as liberals and try to figure out what's important to us and what we want to emphasize going forward. But after that primary process is over, well, you just line up and follow whoever you guys nominated because, at that point, after the primary is over, it's one of two choices, and you got to pick, the person who's going to emphasize that platform that you had a hand in developing.
That's right. And, if you want different kinds of voting, support those people in the primary and hope they make it forward and can change the voting methods. But until then, recognize first past the post is the process.
Well, if you want different kinds of voting, I'm going to point out that paying attention to the federal elections is completely worthless. You need to be talking to your state representatives for that. The federal government does not control how voting happens.
Right.
Absolutely.
And then, so once federal elections happen, you just have to recognize it's first past the post. And that's how it goes. Yeah. Okay. So can we shed any light on the abortion debate? Right. It is ongoing. It has gone to the point where they need to pass something to really keep the base engaged. And that means that even if it's not based in science, it can be based emotionally. And that's very effective, right? Obviously. Everyone has some emotional consideration about the abortion debate. Is there anything that people can come to grips with on both sides, or is it just going to be this way forever?
I don't have an answer.
If we're looking to reconcile science and religion, what we can do is we can say, hey, there's no good way of estimating the age of a fetus. Almost everyone aborts past the 20-week threshold for reasons other than contraceptive. So most
of those happen before 6 weeks, right?
And you mentioned reconcile science and religion. There's a group called Secular Pro-Life. There are people claiming to have non-religious.
There's obviously at least
reasons.
One religious Republican who is very pro-abortion as well, right? So
right.
These feelings are very mixed, very, very mixed.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's I have no idea.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. It's not really religion, right? That's obviously one of the things that get focused on.
It's
almost all religion. We need to be honest.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah.
So, evangelical Christianity is what drives the pro-life, quote unquote, side.
And Catholicism too.
Yes.
But if you look at because abortion is really split so down the middle, and the majority of Americans are religious, there is definitely some people who believe in choice. And so why do they believe in choice? And I think maybe one argument you can really make here is that autonomy of a woman's body has some value, compared to the autonomy of the fetus as well, right? And so once the fetus could be autonomous, obviously, I think those two rights come into balance. And I think the Supreme Court has established a pretty good test there, which is that at that point, the fetus's rights are matched up with the mother's, and there's no more legal abortions at that point. Unless
past
crazy medical.
Past 24 weeks, it's usually called a delivery.
Yeah.
So
right, exactly.
Well, that's actually true.
Exactly.
Right. That's right.
And I can almost respect the people more who are like against abortion in all cases, even in rape, because if they're going to be like pro-life, they're consistent, right? And it's like if you're like, well, no, if you were raped, then it's okay. And it's like, but no, your argument is that it's a person. So therefore, it shouldn't matter if the dad was just an asshole or not, or I'm sorry, a bad person or not, right? Like that shouldn't make a difference if your inherent argument is that you're just pro-life.
Because if you extend that logic out, basically what you're saying is that any child resulting from incest or rape is less worthy of living than any other child. So either, go choice all the way or go life all the way, but otherwise it's not intellectually consistent.
Exactly.
But abortion's not really an intellectual issue, right? It's It's an emotional issue, because if it was an intellectual issue, this 20-week ban wouldn't make any sense. And
exactly. So this is never going to be resolved. I feel not within my lifetime. So.
Yeah, we go on, right? I guess we should point out these bills that I don't think this bill would actually be heavily supported if it really had a chance of becoming law. As I understand it, this has no chance in the Senate because it would require 60 votes.
Oh, would it? Okay. Oh, good. Yeah, we're back to normal.
Which is sort of we're sort of into normal legislative gridlock, which is why people aren't completely freaked out about this. It's obviously not good, and everyone's going to use it to fundraise, but it's not likely to pass the Senate because of the 60 vote threshold. And I don't know what else to add there. It's just another piece of the culture war designed to split people very precisely. And, it's not exactly designed to become law, because you might make this law pass the Senate if you were to put in things like exceptions for medical problems. That would almost change, like,
the life of the mother. I don't even think it includes that.
That would basically change nothing. You could have a 20-week ban as long as you could still get an abortion if there was any kind of issue with the fetus or the mother.
Just a doctor's note or something like that. But even then, I'm uncomfortable with it, because then you're still leaving it up to somebody other than the people that are closely involved in it. And what if you're in a rural area where the only people with an OB ward is a Catholic hospital, and they refuse to do anything concerning abortion? I mean, even if it's warranted.
So once again, if you were to make the case that as long as the person filed some intent before 20 weeks anywhere, then, or after 20 weeks, something bad is found to happen, you could probably get almost everybody on board with that, right? If you were to say, as long as if you were just delaying finding out that you were pregnant and you just wanted to use it for birth control purposes past 20 weeks, I bet a lot of people would be on board with not allowing that to happen, provided that these other things were covered, these extra externalities. And I mean, I more or less agree with you. I think the current limit is fine. But what I'm trying to get at is that this bill isn't intended to pass. If it was intended to pass, you would have provisions for these things.
They would have included the provision that if you were the mistress of a congressman, then
that's a good point. Maybe
then it probably would have been okay.
You think they'd go for taxpayer funding for that, like a
the Hyde Amendment just out the
exceptions? Asterisks. I mean, I wish we could. I wish this was something that could be moved on from, but people's emotions are obviously very strong, and they should be, I think, in this particular instance. I think there's very good reason for it to be very strong. And I think if you've known anyone who's had to have a late-term abortion for a fetus that was very much wanted, I think you just see this cruel bill you possibly come up with. It's just horrifically cruel to that kind of person.
Yeah.
And
what's interesting is I think Rick Santorum's wife, right? Like she even had to
she had
have a late term.
Yeah, something like that. I don't remember the exact details, but that's right. I mean, it's just,
and they're very, very Catholic, and they brought it home, and
I think that's kind of fine. A strange thing. Well, I don't know. I think you can grieve any way you want, right?
Right. But like showed it to the kids, and
I mean, again, I think that's okay. But the point is, they had that option, and it was whatever dignity they chose to do it with.
Right. I don't know how far along she was, so I don't know if this would have impacted, but.
Yeah, and I think there were stories of Barbara Bush had something similar as well. It's just it's traumatic.
It is. But it happens. It happens.
And it's a lot.
It's not just people sitting around like, I think I'll just go have an abortion today.
Yeah,
hey guys,
and I mean,
I'll be right back. By the way,
right.
Okay.
Right now.
Oh, I thought you meant you were going to have an abortion.
Well, it has been 20 weeks, I guess, so it's time.
It's time.
I have to think about it. Yeah, I mean, I won't get into any stories, but, of all the couples I know who, have kids and want kids, I think every single one of them has had, a miscarriage at some point, and it's just terrible.
It's very, it's common. It's very common.
It's very common, yeah.
30% or something.
It's way higher than that. I mean, especially if you go down to, before even if you didn't know you were pregnant kind of thing, the miscarriage rate is just astronomical. And now, obviously this week is dominated by this shooting in Las Vegas that just absolutely horrific. And I stay in Las Vegas quite a bit for work, and it just heart-wrenching. I even knew this guy gets apparently a person who's been fairly wealthy has this huge armory and takes it up to the 32nd floor of a hotel and begins just shooting into a crowd of people, of 20,000 people. You can't miss. And it does, the sounds at least make it sound like he had some kind of a modifier that made his weapons fire faster than you would if you were just pulling the trigger every single time with your finger.
I think I read 400 rounds per minute.
Yeah.
It's looking like he had what's called a bump fire stock.
Right. They at least found several. As of the date of this recording, it's unknown if those were applied to the rifles, but he fired a lot faster than I could fire.
Yeah.
And it seems likely that he had some kind of attachment to those weapons to make them fire that fast. And he fired for somewhere between 9 and 11 minutes and over 600 people were hurt or killed. And as of today, 59 people are dead.
Including the shooter, right?
I don't know if that includes the shooter.
I think that's 58 and 59, including the shooter.
That's probably correct then. And he had cameras in the hallway to watch the police come. And it seems like the police were not able to get into his room for over an hour, if I understand it right. At this time, that may be incorrect ultimately. He had this insane amount of time to just pour fire down. And this is going to be one of these cases where, even though there were people who had guns at the concert, there was a guitarist who famously has this article that says, "It's time for gun control now." He was playing up on the stage. They had guns, but a pistol is useless at that distance. There's no way you can return fire 32 stories up and 1,400 yards away. That's just
right.
No way. And if you have to go out in public with a sniper rifle, you're not free, right? If you have to go to stay alive, you have to be out in public with a sniper rifle. That doesn't make you free.
The only way somebody would have been able to impact the situation in terms of carrying a firearm is if they were carrying a high-quality hunting rifle and preferably a spotter with binoculars and windage equipment.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
He
had the advantage that he's not trying to hit anyone specific.
Yeah.
He's just trying to rain bullets.
Right. And you're assuming you know where he is, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it was dark. It was that night, and you're assuming you know exactly where this guy is. And he's up 32 stories high in this tiny little window. This really puts to this good guy with a gun can stop. Right.
And the bad guy and the good guy were the same in this particular case, if you want to use that terminology, which I don't. But it's just such a twisted thing that this guy decided to do. It's really sick.
They don't know. They have no motive, right? Like there's no religious or political affiliation. He was a white guy in his 60s.
A lone wolf, I think we have.
Lone wolf, right? Not a terrorist, not a thug.
Yeah, not a terrorist.
No, he's white. So
he's
white, exactly. So
nothing we can do about that.
Yeah.
But this really brings into a problem, and I want to be very clear here. I'm actually very pro-gun. I have a lot of guns. I have an AR, and I think one of the things I like about having guns is not being shot by them. Right? That's my big thing. And what I hope we get into on this podcast is just discussing how it's a very complex situation, but there are steps that could be taken. And we'll get into some of the steps that are even being proposed in Congress right now that seem to be supported by Republicans. And as I said at the start of the show, you're going to hear things that you're going to agree with, hopefully, but you're also going to hear things that upset you. And we're going to really go into this debate. And so,
and we can talk about what's worked in other countries. We can use other countries as a model. Yeah. Countries like Canada, the UK, and Australia, who have significantly restricted their firearms laws, and we can use them as very close models for what would happen in the United States. Obviously, the problem here is larger in terms of civilian firearm ownership and a gun culture here, as well as shooting deaths. But you can look at what other countries have done and use that to extrapolate.
Yeah, and the big thing in the United States is that, of course, the Second Amendment absolutely exists, and the interpretations have changed over time. And, personally, I'm one of those people who feels that all your rights matter or they're all subject to being taken away. And I think that's sort of what the ACLU takes the same position on, right? They've defended Nazis. They've defended all kinds of people because their position is that your rights matter. Now, that said, as we were talking about in the abortion debate, there are limits on your rights. And Ronald Reagan, of course, is famous for having restricted greatly a lot of the types of weaponry you're allowed to purchase as a civilian, notably automatic firearms. An automatic firearm made before 1986, you can own, but if you're
depending on the state you're in,
depending on the state you're in, and you still have to be, I think you have to get a tax stamp to buy one, but you can't buy a new one, right? You cannot go buy a new one unless you're a private security force or have some other. There's a few exceptions to that, but for the most part, you can't. And I think that system has worked okay. Those weapons, as far as I know, have never been used in a mass casualty event.
They've become prohibitively expensive. I mean, you're looking at $20,000 to get a quote unquote legal machine gun in this country.
That's right. And the bump stock device that this guy used is relatively cheap, like $100, and modifies an AR or type of weapon to fire just about as fast as a machine gun.
And basically how that works, if anybody's interested, is what it is. It's a stock on the back of the gun. So when you shoot the gun pushes back into the stock so that your finger rests on this like a ledge on the stock
right
itself.
Next to the trigger.
Yeah, and the trigger goes back into the stock. So then when it recoils back forward, your finger, while resting on that ledge, gets pushed into the trigger, or the trigger gets pushed into your finger, pulling the trigger and shooting the gun again. So it gives you it gives a good approximation of fully automatic fire without actually modifying the action of the weapon itself.
Right. And there's things like double pull triggers that you can get, but those only do 2 shots.
Right. There's a crank device that you can get.
Yeah. Gat crank.
Yeah.
But this is probably the most, or the closest thing that would simulate an automatic weapon that you can get, this stock. And, this is one of the things that actually does appear to maybe have bipartisan support. We'll see in a week when the NRA finally breaks their silence and goes 100% against it. But
right. Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see, because this is what they do now. Every time there's a mass shooting, they shut down for a week, and then they wait and they wait and they wait, and then they come back out. And as far as it goes, it's actually a pretty good strategy. And what they try and do in the meantime is say it's too soon, but they never say when is a good time, right? I think from now on, anybody who says it's too soon should be asked, okay, well, give me a date. When is not
give me a date. Yeah. And so following along with that, one of my friends on Twitter, one of my coworkers, he tweeted tonight. For those people who don't know, I work at NASA. He said, imagine if Apollo 1, Challenger, or Columbia, imagine if after Apollo 1, Challenger, or Columbia, NASA had said, now is not the time to discuss how to prevent future accidents. And I thought that was brilliant. I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
And the police don't wait.
It's so true.
Yeah, the police don't wait after a shooting to go look for the killer, right? That's not how this works. You go and deal with it.
Let's just wait.
Yeah. And I mean, look, it's an effective tactic if what you're trying to do is shut down the debate, because you can't do that, right? You can just say, oh, it's always too soon. It's always too soon.
Right.
And
and can I just put it out there that if I'm ever killed in one of these mass shooting events, you feel free to politicize it in my name, please.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The next day, talk about it. Go ahead. I won't be offended. I promise.
So one thing I did want to briefly talk about is just kind of a sketch overview on the legal foundation behind our Second Amendment rights and what that actually means. So so if we look at the text of the Second Amendment, and I'm operating from memory here, but it's a well-regulated militia, comma, being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And so basically what that means is that the people who founded the country and drafted the Bill of Rights felt that the ability to form a militia was of paramount importance to the security of the United States and the security of the
it had been very necessary in the Revolutionary War, right? That had been a big thing that made America possible.
It had been contributory. The contributions of the militia during the Revolutionary War are a little overblown. They were actually really hard to get them to actually fight. But beyond that, it was a very popular thing at the time. And so basically the Second Amendment isn't about hunting. It isn't about home defense. It isn't about any of these specific rights. What it was originally drafted to be was a guarantee that at any point in time, the people of the United States could form ad hoc militia groups to resist foreign or domestic aggression.
You say that, but obviously it's been interpreted differently in cases like Heller and McDonald, right? But right. So if you want,
and the one thing I do want to say, if we look at the two controlling Supreme Court cases, so we have United States versus Miller, and we have DC versus Heller. Yeah, in the 1930s. So that's Heller the first one. 09. And Heller was 2009. So U.S. v. Miller. Basically, Miller was a guy who got arrested because he had a sawed-off shotgun. And he said that the sawed-off shotgun must be permitted because it was useful in a militia setting and therefore was protected under the Second Amendment. And essentially, U.S. v. Miller is the controlling precedent that ruled that the Second Amendment protects anything that has a valid militia use. And they ruled that against Miller because the sawed-off shotgun had no military viability. It had no military use. So that is still on the books, and Heller didn't overturn that. DC versus Heller is a statute. Basically, the District of Columbia had what was essentially a blanket gun ban, and you had to keep any firearm disassembled and locked and put away inside your house, and there were prohibitive requirements to obtain any license to have any sort of weapon in your house.
And I think you couldn't have a pistol made after 75 or something like that. Is that? Yeah,
that sounds right. I've not read that far into the specifics of it, but basically the long and short of it is that DC versus Heller applied that to individuals, where not only could you not ban weapons that had a militia viability, but that people had the right to use those weapons within reason, within the reasonable purposes. And they found that the District of Columbia violated the rights of their citizens by issuing that ban. So essentially what the Second Amendment means is that every single American currently has the right to have access to some firearms that would be useful within a militia setting and to use those weapons for reasonable individual purposes. So that leaves a lot of room for interpretation.
Yeah. For example, Connecticut, I believe, has laws, and I think other states too, where you have to have a license, right, to purchase a firearm. And that has not been shown to be unconstitutional. It's been around since the 1990s. And so there are a lot of other ways. And I mean, if we look at what the right does on abortion, right, what they do is they just try and add more and more restrictions. These are, I'm not suggesting that's what we have to do, but it might be possible to do things like get rid of, for example, these bump stocks, which really don't seem to serve any purpose except to kill a lot of people. I mean, yeah, they'd be a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong. I think it'd actually be pretty fun to shoot one. But at the same time, what it really is for is sending a lot of lead downfield very quickly. And as we saw there's no hunting purpose for this.
No, you don't need to be shooting 400 rounds a minute. I don't care how much fun it is. And even if you're going to use the militia excuse, and I say excuse, it's like if it's technically in the Constitution and if it's a right, I get it. Right. I get it. That's a whole right.
I mean, it's an obsolete principle, but that's what it means. So.
Right. But honestly, if that's the route you're going to go, man, if the military's coming for you, it's like you're not going to fight them off. It's like they got tanks and jets and they have nukes, and it's like, what is in the Constitution? And it's like, well, you know what wasn't in the Constitution? Saying slavery was bad and saying women can vote, and it's like that can change. So I don't think it's going to happen, but I really think it just shouldn't be right that you can just go into a crowd and mow down 58 people just because the Constitution says this is my legal right, and this is fun for me to shoot on the weekend. Right. I just take issue with that, and I say that as a gun owner. My husband, he hunts, so
I think all three of us are gun owners.
But we have rifles and shotguns, not
and I want to be clear that I don't think anybody is really suggesting taking away your hunting rifles or your things that really are for self-defense. But, 100-round magazine with a bump stock is really not for self-defense. No,
it's not.
That doesn't pass the test. There's just no way that's for self-defense.
Right. And that's kind of something I've always wondered about. It's like, why?
That's an offensive weapon. That's just what that is.
Yeah. It's like, why can't we have tanks? We can have, but
a rocket launcher. As an aside, at trivia, there are two legal civilian-owned miniguns in the United States.
In Nevada.
So, you'd have to spend about $1 million, depending. I mean, at least that's the one the last one went for at auction to get one. But you can get a legal minigun in the United States. Right. It's been featured on Mythbusters.
So. And you'll spend that much in ammo every year.
Oh yeah. You lose that much in ammo in about 30 seconds.
I was gonna say, what do you?
Yeah.
But it was interesting. So I was traveling. Actually, I was in Seattle the day afterwards, and I was traveling back to Houston. And so I had a layover in Nevada, and so I was in the Las Vegas airport, like just hours after the shooting had occurred, and it was awful because on the way up there, everyone was so happy and excited. I sat in this row with these two girls that were going to a bachelorette party. Whenever the plane landed, everyone clapped. And then on the way back, it was just complete silence. The airport, people were crying. Everyone was telling their stories. And it was just so sad. And then on the plane, as we were taking off, it was like people just closed the windows. Like they didn't even want to see the strip until the plane started taxiing and really taking off. And then they opened the windows and you could see the strip. And this one girl in my aisle, she just started just crying. I mean, she just lost it, completely lost it. And it was really rough. It was really, really rough. So.
Yeah,
I don't know.
So Jim Wright, who's the guy who writes on Facebook primarily, but he has some really good articles, and he was just talking about how this just happens all the time. He's just got this list, and he's just saying, is anything going to change? And maybe this time we'll get bump stocks banned, or maybe even move to class 3. Maybe that would be okay. I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't know how this is okay, but things like marijuana are like, no,
yeah,
absolutely not. Like
you could really hurt someone with marijuana. Yeah,
exactly.
So there's one other thing that I want to point out, and that's that we tend to focus as human beings on the most shocking and horrifying events, and then we ignore the everyday. But the real problem with guns in this country, in terms of statistical harm to the nation, is not so much the mass shootings, but it is the everyday individuals who end up dying.
From domestic disputes, suicides.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, I've got statistics pulled up here. In 2014, there were 33,594 people who died from firearms, 14 of which died in mass shootings. So shootings is defined as shootings with 3 or more victims. Basically, they don't have to die, but 3 or more people were the target. Yeah, they got shot or they got shot at.
Does that include the person with the gun, or just people killed by the gun?
No, it's just people that shot at. I believe that's the case. So it's 3 people plus the person with the gun. But so if we're to compare that, this year. You have 59 people that died in Vegas. So you're looking at somewhere about 60 times the amount of people. No, 600 times the amount of people died in Las Vegas, dying. Actually, yes, it's about 600 times the amount of people who died in Las Vegas dying every single year, just normally from these guns. 6% of all suicide attempts are use a gun, but 54% of all successful suicide attempts use a gun. 90% of the people who survive suicide don't do so again.
They don't try to commit suicide again.
Yeah, they don't try to commit suicide again. There's about a 5% success rate if you're trying to commit suicide by cutting your wrists. It's somewhere about 10% if you're trying to poison yourself by swallowing pills. The hanging comes close to using a gun, but all of this stuff, there is no method of suicide as successful as a firearm. And that's about 2/3 of all people who die from gun violence in the United States, or people that are killing themselves. And,
it's a lot of white guys too. And it's such a strange thing that doesn't seem to factor into that image of gun ownership. Right.
No. And the thing is, you'll talk to people about this and they'll say, well, suicides don't really count because they'll just find another way to commit suicide. Well, no, that's actually not true. One of the primary predictors as to whether somebody is going to commit suicide or going to attempt suicide is whether there's a gun in the house. It's really kind of a snap decision. You're walking along the Brooklyn Bridge and you decide to jump off. you've got a gun and then you decide to shoot yourself. It's not something that somebody decides on and then they plan for a long time. That's just not how it happens.
Right. So I'm sure some do, but it's generally not the case, right?
Right. I mean,
it's always exceptions.
And even if we assumed that every single one of those 21,000 people who die from committing suicide with a firearm every single year, if we removed that from the equation, if they all attempted another method, we would still be looking at tens of thousands of lives saved because it's not as effective and they're very unlikely to try to commit suicide again. Mm-hmm. So just pointing that out. And then the drastically higher rate of homicide in the United States. About 2/3 of homicides are done with pistols. And usually after these mass shootings, we're thinking about assault weapons. We're thinking about bump fire stocks. We're thinking about high-capacity magazines. But we aren't thinking about a $150 high point 9mm pistol that anybody can pick up in a gun shop and then go use to stick up somebody or bring her along in a robbery or shoot their wife or do any of these things that are just horrifyingly common in the United States. It's 11,000 people that are dying from firearms, about 7,000 or 8,000 just from pistols alone. These are weapons. They don't have a militia usage. They don't have a hunting usage. They're actually not that good for home defense. People think of them for home defense, but the SWAT instructors and the police instructors that I obtained my firearms instruction from told me to use a shotgun instead. Yeah. So there's very little reason for us to have them other than sidearms for police officers or specific situations. So, it's that drives my outrage on this, that not only do we accomplish very little in the aftermath of these horrific shootings, but for some reason, the debate is shunted towards things like the assault weapon ban, which, it sounds great, but it's probably not going to save many people's lives.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't save many people's lives. And then 5 years down the road, after we put a huge effort into passing a high-capacity magazine ban and an assault weapon ban, the conservatives come back and the NRA comes back and they say, look, it didn't decrease gun violence. And it didn't decrease gun violence because we weren't paying attention to what actually caused gun violence and gun deaths. And we didn't tailor the solution to the problem.
Right. That was an emotional response, right? It looks scary. And I think that this is where, again, we come back to, this is where liberals are guilty of not using the science, right? And that's
agreed. Like but I do have to disagree with you when you said the NRA is going to say, look, this isn't what worked. This is what really works. I don't think the NRA has ever come back with a solution.
No. I'm sorry. just to characterize that, what'll happen is, this happened when Bill Clinton passed the assault weapon ban. Basically, what happened?
I agree with you. I agree with you there. I just don't think there was ever a point where the NRA said, no, look, this is what actually does work.
They were trying to cast it as, look, the assault weapons ban didn't work, so gun control doesn't work. Right. And that's getting in the way of future legislation to help combat gun violence. So if we don't tailor the legislation that we're trying to pass to actually solve the problem, then we're shooting ourselves in the foot by making ourselves look bad.
Yeah, you're right. And
I want to point out another problem is that people just are pretty casual with their guns. Every week in America, a toddler shoots somebody. Right. Yeah. I mean, that is terrifying to me that toddlers, they go dig around in the purse, they find the gun, and I think there was a couple people have been shot at Walmart and even killed just by toddlers going into the purse looking for gum or whatever. And it's horrifying that you're not actually practicing gun safety.
I live in Texas, and there are people who they get mad whenever there's signs outside the Whataburger or wherever. I don't know. I say Whataburger. Maybe it's not Whataburger. So just
you're making me miss Whataburger.
Paraphrasing. That's not cool. I know, but it's like, no firearms allowed, and it's like they will protest. It's like, well, I can't open carry my AR-15 inside your fast food restaurant. Yeah. Like,
what about your fashion?
No, this isn't a fight. Like, just put it in the car. Yeah, but I say that, and I'm just in 2007 at Johnson Space Center when I was working there. There was a man, and he did come to work, and he was an active shooter, and he shot his manager and all the workers. We had to shelter in place. So this was before iPhones and Facebook and Twitter and everything. And we barricaded ourselves in our office. We pushed tables up against the door, And so we didn't know, like there was so much confusion. We didn't know if there was one shooter. We didn't know if there were 5 shooters. All we could do was just go to our desktop computers. We didn't have laptops, and just go to CNN.com or whatever. We could hear the helicopters flying overhead, the news helicopters, and there were SWAT teams outside, and just refresh and try to see what was going on. And just emails basically to, like from the center telling us, trying to give us updates on, whenever they would get news, try to tell us the news. So that was really scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was really scary. It was like, and I think he just used, you can look it up. You can Google Johnson Space Center shooting. It's on Wikipedia. The guy had a personal vendetta against his manager, took another employee hostage. He ended up letting her go, and he killed himself. And this took up the better part of an afternoon. It was about 5 hours long. We were barricaded in our office. And then finally at the end of the day, they gave the all clear. Everyone just ran. We bolted for the parking lot, got in our cars. We didn't have, like I said, we didn't have iPhones or whatever. So we didn't have service for the cell phones that we did have. The service that we had was terrible inside our office. So we were finally able to call our friends and loved ones. Text messaging wasn't what it is today. And we'd let everyone know that we were okay. And it's just not a fun thing. So I don't know if we can just minimize this somehow. Like other countries seem to not have this problem. I don't want to take away everyone's guns. I just want to not have so many people go through.
We have this conversation basically every couple months, and it just it's sick.
Yeah, and and Sandy Hook, when little kids, I don't want them to have to go through that.
Yeah.
So do we want to talk about what's worked in other countries then, and what we can learn from other nations?
A little bit. I'd also like to just again point to the Connecticut example as something that does seem to be working in America. There's a story that we'll go ahead and post later that's showing that even though crime in general went down since the 1990s when this bill passed, it does seem like Connecticut versus a Connecticut where they didn't pass this bill, the one that passed the bill does seem to be at least addressing this to some degree. And the point is, cars have gotten a lot safer. Like per mile driven, we've been able to save lives. And it's such a weird thing that we can't even have that discussion about guns. We can respect rights, but we can also, like you're saying, let's look at the data. It's such a sick thing that we cannot study that data, that there's actual bans on being able to study that data by the appropriate agencies. Really just looking for, is there something we can do? I mean, one conclusion might be there's no, you shouldn't, if you think that's what the result is going to be, then you shouldn't be afraid of the research.
Yeah.
Don't presuppose the outcome. And, because one of the, let's get into the details, but one of these things could just be a cultural shift that could happen. It could just be that there might be a cultural shift where this many guns doesn't produce as many deaths. And those things happen, just over time. As we talked about, a lot of attitudes do evolve. But this current, howler monkeys come out every time this happens on, everyone's got their preset talking points, and they're just going to hammer them into the ground, and they're not going to change minds, and they're not going to even have a good faith discussion. Can't even agree that maybe we should save some lives. It's just so hard.
It is. And I'll show you, they had, and I'm just going off of memory here, so please forgive me if I say something wrong, but they had pretty lax gun laws. And then I think in the mid 90s, they had the Port Arthur shooting where this guy, in Australia, and this guy, he went and killed a bunch of people at a resort. And after that, like they had one instance, right? And they were like, we're done. And they paid people to turn in their guns. And after that, they were like, no more guns. And they haven't had an incident since. That was it.
Yeah. And people like to point after mass shooting events sort of correctly that if somebody wants to commit a mass casualty event, they can find a way. But you look at France. Is there prime example?
Look at France, look at Spain, look at exactly. You can't, but
the point is you can do more with guns. And that was proven in France, right? The Bataclan, they attacked with guns, they killed more people than with the truck. And the point ultimately just has to be, can we at least agree that maybe saving lives would be a really good thing? And then, can we have a discussion where we talk about balancing out people's rights with the right to, why is the right to stay alive not an interest group? You know what I mean?
Exactly. The right to go to concerts.
The right to go outside. To a concert without a flak jacket on and helmet and
the right to go to work.
Right. Yeah.
The right to go to elementary school. I mean,
yeah, these rights also should matter quite a bit. And somehow that just doesn't get factored into this conversation is that, yeah, I want to own guns. I like to. And it is a right unless the Constitution gets dramatically changed. But at the same time, I also like staying alive. That's a big deal to me. And I like that my family's alive, that they haven't been shot. That's a right that needs to be balanced.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I've got some interesting statistics I'm pulling up here.
Okay.
So here we go. Okay, so the point I want to make, if we pull back a little bit from mass shootings and from the horrific, the major events that happen, and we look at firearm crime in the United States, and we look at the source of the weapons used in that crime, we should look at that data when we try to think about how we try to impact the rate of firearm crime. So if we're trying to shrink the supply of guns available to criminals, we look at how criminals obtain the guns, and then we use that to create an inference. Now, the point I'm going to make here is more than 70% of the weapons used between 1993 and 2001, according to Department of Justice data, were obtained through legal or gray market channels. So basically what you're looking at is 14% of people bought the guns legally, used in crime. That's 14% in 1997, 11% in 2004. So between those two numbers is where we're looking at. The rest of it, you're looking at people that are buying a gun from a family or a friend, or what they'll do is they'll get somebody to go to the store with them to do what's called a straw purchase. And they'll pick out the gun and somebody else will buy it and then they'll hand it to them in the car. Or what you can do is you can go online in most states and just meet somebody off of, whatever the gun trading equivalent to Craigslist is. I haven't been on that. I buy my guns through a local dealer. I don't buy them private party. But in most states, you can still buy them private party without any regulation.
Yeah, without a check, yeah. And I think most gun owners support the idea that, anyone buying a gun should have to, at least get a little bit of a background check. And one of the reasons I've never sold a gun is because I don't want to deal with that, right? I don't want to accidentally sell a gun to somebody who misuses it. And there's no particular way for me to do a background check.
And in Washington State, if you're selling your gun privately, you have to do so at a federal firearms dealer. And they will run the appropriate background checks and then transfer the firearm. So we're looking at, it's about 25% of people in 2004 from prison inmates in the United States who obtained their gun through like a drug dealer or off the street or through other like straight up black market channels. Everybody else, they were stealing the gun, they were buying a private party, or they were otherwise getting a gun that was legally purchased from a licensed vendor. So that's 75% of the supply to the criminal market that we can actually regulate. And maybe even more than that, because we don't know where those drug dealers were getting their guns in the first place. Maybe some of the drug dealers and some of the gun dealers were buying stolen guns or buying, buying them from private people or reselling guns from dealers to the black market. So if people are telling us that you can't affect the supply of guns, that you can't affect what guns are getting up in the hands of criminals, that's patently false. Because 75% of the time, they're getting it through those channels. And it's only 11% of the time that they're actually walking into a dealer, buying it, and then going out and using it in a crime. But you can do something like licensing people to own firearms or treating a gun like it was a car and giving it a title so that you can track ownership transfers. Whenever you sell a car in this country, you have a title that comes along with it. You meet somebody at the DMV, you sign the title, they give you money. They hand it into the person at Department of Licensing, and they get a new registration and a new title. We can do that with guns. We can track the guns as they go through the system. And that prevents people from buying a gun for their drug dealer friend and then giving it to him so that he can go off and rob a frickin' bank or somebody's house or use it in a homicide and have it less easily traceable.
What's the joke? Mandatory ultrasounds for purchases, right? But
right, absolutely.
But the
I mean, that's kind of my rant. I'm sorry for going off on that rant.
No, look.
I'm just a little tired of that argument that, hey, they're always going to find a way to get a gun. Well, maybe some of them will, but, it's going to take a really determined person if you drive the supply, and that'll drive costs up. So
yeah, right. Driving up costs is one of the big things, right? We see this all the time. It's what economists always show is like, if you can drive up the cost, you can make them have to go a different route. For example, you can get guns in Europe, but you typically don't because it would be very expensive and very difficult and, to commit crimes with. And I think there can be an American solution which allows the expression of your rights, but also at least attempts to try these things. And here's one of the things I've never understood about laws. Why don't we do laws that say the intent is this? And in 5 years, if we don't see this happening, then the law just goes away, right? Like, it doesn't have to stay on the books forever.
No,
there could be experiments to say, look, one of the really strange things here might be we may not be able to prevent mass casualty events, but maybe we can prevent these other things, which are, as you pointed out, much more common, right? What if we could really drop down, the rate of homicides and suicides? What if we could really make a dent in gun violence, even if these mass casualty events still happen? Why shouldn't we strive to do that?
Specifically using Australia as an example, licensing and registering, licensing gun owners and then tracking gun ownership is one of the primary components of their 1996 gun legislation. And I've read some interesting data suggesting that is primarily behind the large drop in gun violence down there, because it dried up the supply to illicit elements. People were less likely to give their guns up. They were less likely to sell in private party to people they don't know. They were less likely to get stolen. And if they were more likely to be reported stolen. So, this kind of thing, it really does work, and it doesn't significantly infringe on the right of the people to own weapons that they feel are necessary for their home defense or their sporting purposes or target shooting or whatever they want to use them for.
Yeah. So, and I want to make one point that I always find a bit strange, which is people argue, well, these guns are here so you can, take on the government. But the Constitution, which gives you the right to own a gun, also makes it pretty damn clear. The Constitution makes it very clear that you don't get to overthrow the government, right? There are such, treason and sedition are in the Constitution. It is not in the Constitution that you get to take over the government. And the Whiskey Rebellion, guns, right? Civil War, et cetera, have proven that that's just not what you get to do. And you're not going to take on an A-10, no matter what weapon you have. An A-10 comes up on you, that's it. It's over.
Yeah.
And with those realities in mind, again, let's balance out this system in some way that at least attempts to address this thing that seems like an epidemic. It's a pretty big
Do we have time for Trump, Puerto Rico?
Sure. I think
so. I just shared this on Facebook. It's a picture of Trump throwing the
paper towels.
The paper towels, and it's like
I think I posted that on my personal page too.
It's like he's throwing the paper towels into the crowd. It says Trump, the quicker fucker upper.
I like the post you have here. Humans will always murder. No gun law can change that. Screams a country that outlawed too much toothpaste on a plane.
Yeah, that was Sarcastic Rover. I love Sarcastic Rover. I have no idea who Sarcastic Rover is, but I love them.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
Hilarious.
So I grew up on the Gulf Coast, south of I-10. I've been through many, many hurricanes. None like this. This was insane. I did live in no, not 2 in a row. I did live in New Orleans for a while. I wasn't there for Katrina. But for him to show up weeks later and just start throwing like paper towels to the crowd, it's not a Mardi Gras parade. These aren't these aren't beads. Like, no one's excited about this. Like, what's the message you're sending? Like, are you telling them to clean up themselves? Like, the mess? I don't understand. And they don't have water. And there was another report that said he was confused and disgusted whenever someone tried to explain to him the water purification process. And it's like, he just had he had a conversation with the astronauts aboard the International Space Station, where there is a device on ISS that will recycle pee. And you may think it's gross, whatever. I don't care. it's really, it turns pee to water, and it's really purified water. It's more pure than the water that we drink here on Earth. And he was really disgusted by that. Like, well, you do that. I'm not going to do that. And so he knows that water purification devices exist. This was just a few months ago. And so he's in Puerto Rico, and this woman's like, yeah, we have this device, and it takes like dirty water and it turns it to clean water. And he's like, what is this magic? I don't understand. What is this sorcery? And he questions the woman, like, do you work for this company? And he's so suspicious. And she's like, no, I'm volunteering for a church. And he's like, would you drink it? And she's like, yeah. And he's just like, no. And it was so weird. Like, he just cannot comprehend the fact that you can take dirty water and make it clean. What the hell? I'm sorry. As an engineer, this just baffles me that this 71-year-old man cannot comprehend this simple process. It's just basic chemistry, and it blows my mind. And I'm sorry, back to Puerto Rico.
Well, he said for a bit they might wipe out all their debt, and then his other people were very quick to say, no, that won't happen. So,
yeah.
No, that's not going to happen. No.
Yeah.
No, we need to protect the hedge funds and the junk bond holders that own Puerto Rico's $75 billion national deficit, or national debt.
National debt, or not debt.
Territorial debt.
Territorial debt. Yeah, territorial debt. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the thing is, Texas and Florida didn't get berated for having, for their finances. And
no, I mean, Houston, we got like so much money.
Yeah. And Texas didn't even have to hit their rainy day fund. He could have said, no, Texas has enough money. You could do it yourself. Right. But no, he didn't do that. And I don't think he should have. Right. I don't think that's part of the deal the states make in the United States. I think we should step in and, to hell with all these hypocrites who every time some other state has a problem, they vote against it. And then when their state has a problem, they vote for it. Right. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's so stupid. And he wasn't going to do anything for Florida because Florida's sacred. And granted, Florida should have gotten the same response as Texas did. But we all know, like, Florida's sacred and they are going to get preferential treatment, which every state should that has gone through a natural disaster, because it's horrible. And when no one has power for weeks and internet and water, it's really traumatizing.
And
but Puerto Rico, right. And then he made some comment about, like, he's just attacking them like, well, they're watching the fake news and the fake news is telling them to be against me. And it's like, they don't have electricity.
They're not watching anything.
They're not watching you. They're not on Twitter. They don't have water.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. And there's no penalty for this, right? That's I think.
Yeah.
And the penalty is the wrong word, but it just becomes another thing, and it's such a. Yeah.
It's just oh my God. And I was talking to one of he's not a Trump supporter, but he's a libertarian coworkers, and this was before. Well, this was after Harvey. So Harvey was the one that hit Houston. But before Irma, I think Irma was the one that hit Florida. So it was before Puerto Rico. And, I was bitching or complaining about Trump as usual. And he was like, well, you'll never say anything good about Trump. And I said, you know what? Actually, whenever he came to Houston, I was watching him on TV. He had children. Like, he hugged children. He acted human. He was normal somewhat. I was like, he did an okay job. And this is just like, what in the hell? Like, it was just, he just went over there and just insulted everyone, threw paper towels at a crowd, told them they don't need flashlights anymore. I don't know. And then insulted their infrastructure and told them they have because of their debt, that they don't deserve relief. I don't know. It was just really weird. And I can't make any sense out of it. And then he's, it's an island and there's big water. And it was like, well, after Haiti's an island. Did you see what we did after the Haiti earthquake? Oh
yeah, we were there on the spot.
Yeah.
And it was to show that America cared. And
yeah, right.
So when we don't do that, it sends the opposite.
We didn't have to. Right. Yeah. And this mayor, this poor woman, is begging him for help because, begging him. People are dying. Like, everyone in this hospital who was in ICU just died. Yeah. And she's begging him for help. And he's like, no, the Democrats told you to turn against me. And it's like, Puerto Rico doesn't even have the same political parties that we have here. What are you talking about? It's exhausting. And these people are dying, and he's making it all about himself because that's what he does.
It's all about ratings and relative death counts and whether, it's worse than Katrina yet. It's like, come on, man. There's 3.5 million people in Puerto Rico. Just pull out the stops, send all the stuff, act at least like we did for Haiti in 2010.
Exactly.
You can even just use the same playbook. It's right there. Just go. Yeah, the last 3 years of this presidency have just been really tiring. A lot. So
the last 3 years?
It hasn't been 3 years.
Oh, I was
how long's it been?
5, 7? I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. And I want to conclude with maybe right. So Puerto Rico just could have been handled a lot better, but I want to conclude with something that I think is really troubling and that we as a country don't have a good handle on, which is that it's becoming very clear that Russia made some very targeted choices on Facebook to try and influence the election. And they were doing it in such a way that it was to really push this racial strife that has existed in this country and make it worse.
Yeah.
And we're just really not in a good place to handle it. And I think everyone's been falling down on the job with this, regardless of what comes out in the collusion investigation. This particular thing exists and still exists. It is still happening. And we're not in a place to deal with it at this moment. And I'm very concerned about it.
We're not in a place to deal with it because we're the administration who is currently in power benefited from it. And they agree with them. I don't know how you can, if you can send me evidence to the contrary, then fine, do it. But everything I've seen him say, everything I've seen him do is horribly racist. And so he doesn't care. I mean, it just came out today or yesterday that he's very slow, or hasn't even started implementing sanctions against Russia. What the hell? They hacked our election process. Yeah. This is war.
They have a congressional mandate. Democracy. They have a congressional mandate to enact sanctions against Russia. But I mean, really, the thing is that, the reason behind that is probably not malevolence. It is probably the understaffing of the high levels of the federal bureaucracy.
Well, the State Department, that would help.
That is malevolence, though, right? At some point, that is malevolence. You're not
right, but still, it's if you were. I mean, they attacked our democracy, our democratic process, and so if we would have an administration who cared about it, wouldn't that be priority one?
Yeah.
No. What's priority one for him? Repealing Obamacare, tax breaks for the rich, and the freaking wall. The transparent wall with solar panels that Mexico is going to pay for. I mean, are you kidding me?
I think they already paid for it. It's already there. The transparent wall. It's very nice.
Oh, with solar panels? Are the solar panels there? We need the solar panels. Okay.
Yeah.
But so Russia's doing this. They're not going to stop. Why should they? They've had no consequences. None.
Yeah. Yeah, there are no consequences to this. And this would be a massive scandal if a Democrat was president.
Oh my God. Obama wore a tan suit and ate Grey Poupon or whatever.
Yeah.
It's
like there are a lot of things that a president doesn't have to do that I could find personally annoying, but a president does have to defend this country. That is a minimum, right? That is what a president has to do. And to see as every civil servant takes the oath and they swear to protect this country or to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I took that oath. The president takes that oath. And what is Trump? What has he done? What is he doing? And it's just, I mean, I put all my faith, whatever you want to call it, in Mueller. I mean, that's just, he has to come up with something because Trump is he's basically sold this to the Russians, highest bidder. And that's really sad and it's very depressing, but he does not care. He got himself in deep. The problem is that it doesn't seem like the nation cares too much right now. A lot of people like us are concerned, but we don't raise holy hell the way it would be if there was a Democrat as president.
Oh yeah, Sean Hannity would.
Yeah,
his head would have exploded.
Yeah, exploded. Yeah.
I believe that the liberals are out to destroy America, and this is evidence of their collaboration with Russia. And we wouldn't hear anything but that.
Yeah, it would.
Oh my God, no.
Yeah,
Alex Jones and his gay frogs. Oh my God.
I mean, yeah. So why is it so hard to make things that are reality stick? Is it just because it's more fun to complain about a tan suit and
no, I think it's just because we're trying to appeal to different audiences. I mean, it's like, look at this, look at pork. It's party of reason and progress. Reason, there you go.
Yeah. Well, all right.
We're not going to accept it, Pizzagate. So we're automatically higher standard, but some people do. So.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today to the Politics Within Reason podcast. We hope you had a good time. If you get a second, please go check out our website at thepartyofreasonandprogress.org. You can find our Twitter handle, our official YouTube channel, Facebook, and we constantly welcome new ideas and things to talk about on the podcast. So we hope to hear from you soon. Thank you. Have a good one.